stage is set for this epic rematch. Both fighters are tense.
Welcome back to Historic Gleason's Gym here in Brooklyn. Brian Kenny here. This is Ringside Joe Louis. The build-up to Joe Louis-Max Schmeling rematch in 1938 was unprecedented in boxing history. The fight, of course, much more than champion versus challenger. It was seen as a fight between freedom and tyranny. Here's Chris Fowler with more on Louis Schmeling 2.
The second Louis Schmeling fight is probably the most political sporting event of the 20th century. At the time, Hitler and fascism were goose-stepping across the globe. That fight was seen as the laboratory for the theory of Aryan supremacy. People thought it was a dress rehearsal for World War II. There was nothing like it in the history of sports.
It did seem as if in fighting Max Schmeling, he was fighting the very quintessence of evil.
I'm happy that I have the chance again to fight for the title.
The world wanted my father to defeat Max Schmeling simply because they wanted to send the clear signal to Germany that there's no such thing as the master race.
The propaganda machinery on both sides of the ocean was so intense, it looked like democracy versus fascism.
Schmeling represented Adolf Hitler. Joe Louis represented Franklin Roosevelt.
With Hitler having annexed Austria in March of 1938, the pre-fight build-up moved from the sports section to the front page, all across America and Europe.
This is no longer a prize fight. This is about bigger stakes. This is about whether they have something in their little nasty DNA pool that is better and purer than our polyglot and self-evidently flawed democratic DNA pool.
People think that I'm going to the ring gun-shy. Why should I go to the ring gun-shy when Schmeling's 2 years older and I'm 2 years smarter in boxing?
Well, there we go. Dick, an interesting point there. The Jack Newfield, the late Jack Newfield,
Yes.
points out the propaganda machine on both sides of the ocean. That both guys are being used for certain purposes, and Schmeling as well. A difficult spot for both fighters. It's in the boxing world, and it's also in the greater world.
I think there's something that's left out. Remember, the 36 Olympic is where Hitler was embarrassed because we were supposed to see the super race, and Jesse Owens came back with 4 gold medals and just devastated the whole country. I mean, when I started doing the research, all my life I grew up where Hitler refused to shake his hand and said, I refused to shake the hand of a Niagara. And talking to Jesse Owens, that never happened, but that was the propaganda machine that was working. After that second fight, now I'm born in 1932, so in the black community, rigidly segregated patterns, most of your shop owners was white. After that second fight, they just gave you boxes of candy. I mean, you walked into the store to get bread, and there was no charge. That was how that propaganda machine had affected America.
Bert, Joe Louis at this point is the heavyweight champion of the world, but from a boxing sense, could he be the real champ in the eyes of the public until he beat Max Schmeling?
He didn't feel so. He felt he was never going to be the champion until he beat Max Schmeling, even if he had beaten Braddock. He still had to wipe this smear off of his record, which was, he disliked Schmeling probably for all the right and wrong reasons. He didn't view him so much as a hero of tyranny and racial supremacy. He hated him because he beat him. And until he beat him, he couldn't stand forward, even though Franklin Roosevelt had him at the White House saying, Joe, we need these muscles for democracy. And something interesting, Chappie, better known as Jack Blackburn, the trainer, had seen something just as Schmeling had seen something in the first fight. Schmeling had 2 fallen arches. If you watch him, he's got a very, very interesting and almost impossible stance. But he can't move backwards. He can just move a little bit. He's got a tremendous right hand and cups it. They knew what to do, go right after him. Louis, fast starter, Schmeling, traditionally slow starter. And what happened was, bam, boom, bam, 2 minutes and 4 seconds, that's it.
Angelo, as we've been talking about through this whole series, some nights a guy is bigger than life, and other times a guy just feels small. This is Joe Louis becoming bigger than life. How strong he was that night in the ring. How strong was he?
Joe Louis, second time around, forget it. Devastation.
Right.
He learned the fighter. That's why it was destruction. Joe did that to everybody. He was the professor of the ring. May not be the sharpest guy outside, but in that ring, he was a professor.
And one of the things that was interesting about that fight, in front of 80,000 people, was general admission here on this ticket for the greatest fight of boxing's history was $3.50.
You have your ticket.
Yes, I know. They wouldn't let me in.
70 million people listening to NBC's radio broadcast of this fight. Clem McCarthy told his audience that this was the greatest fight of our generation. So let's get to the action. Here it is, Clem McCarthy with his radio call.
And there we are. And they got to the ring right together with Arthur Donovan, step around, ground them. And Joe Louis is in the center of the ring. Max going around him. Joe Louis led quick with two straight lefts to the chin. Both of them light, but as the men clinch, Joe Louis tries to get over two hard lefts, and Max ties him up in the breakaway clean. On the far side of the ring now, Max with his back to the ropes, and Louis hooks a left to Max's head quickly, and shoots over a hard right to Max's head. Louis, a left to Max's jaw, a right to his head. Max shoots a hard right to Louis. Louis with the old 1-2, the first to left in the fight, and there Max Schmeling caught him with his guard down and caught that right hand to Louis's jaw, but Louis was going away with the punch at the time. Now Max is backing away against the ropes. Louis is following him and watching for that chance. He is crowding Schmeling. Schmeling is not sitting around very much, but his head quickly and shoots over a hard right to Max's head. Louis, a left to Max's jaw, a right to his head. Max shoots a hard right to Louis. Louis with the old 1-2, the first to left and then the right. He's landed more blows in this one round than he landed in only 5 rounds of the other fight. Not sitting around very much, but his face is already marked, and they stepped into a fast clinch, and at close range, Louis fights desperately to bring up a left to the jaw and a right to the body, and coming out of that clinch, he got over a hard right, and then stabbed Max with a good straight left jab, and Max backed away, and missed the right. Louis then stopped him with 2 straight lefts to the face, and brought over that hard right to the head, high on the temple, and Max tied him up in a clinch and broke ground. Is back against the ropes again there, not too close to the ropes. Louis out, and Louis missed with a left swing, but in close, brought him a hard right over to the jaw, and again a right to the body, a left hook, a right to the head, a left to the head, a right. Schmeling is going down, but he held to his feet, held to the rope, looked to his corner in helplessness, and Schmeling is down. Schmeling is down. The count is 4. And he's up, and Louis right and left to the head, a left to the jaw, a right to the head, and Donovan is watching carefully. Louis measured him, right to the body, a left up to the jaw, and Schmeling is down. The count is 5, 6, 7, 8. The men are in the ring. The fight is over on a technical knockout. Max Schmeling is beaten in 1 round.
The fight of the century, the fight of all time, although there were other fights of the century, but this was the fight of the century, and crushing right hand to the head, Bert, and then cracked him to the ribs, breaking the ribs of Max Schmeling.
You could hear that scream, according to the onlookers, 4 and 5 rows deep. It was a horrific scream. And then you see the towel being thrown in by Schmeling's corner, and referee Arthur Donovan just picks it up and throws it back, and it hangs on the ropes because he insists in all cases he is in control of the fight. The corner cannot give it up. He must.
After this fight, Dick, you have, because Jews have been barred from boxing in Germany at this point, you have Jewish fans, you have black fans, of course, coming together and rooting for Joe Louis. Your thoughts on the aftermath of this fight?
You know, looking at this now and reflecting while you all were looking, let me tell you who was almost as important to black folks as the fight was the announcer. Remember, we couldn't see nothing, okay? That announcer was telling us.
Clem McCarthy.
We didn't see Joe Louis. It was the announcer. And I didn't realize that till just now, what the announcer meant to us. And then after that, just everything went up. It was just...
Clem McCarthy, he's down, he's down.
A very different transmission went back to Germany. It was a more somber call that went back and then pretty much didn't shut it down, but there was talk of pulling the plug?
They pulled the plug.
Right after the fight or not during the fight? During the fight?
5 o'clock in the morning, they were treated to a minute and about 3/4 of a fight, and the rest organ music.
How fast could you pull the plug there after I guess the first right hand, the second right hand that landed? That's all she wrote, I guess, at that point. Yeah.
It could almost be Porky Pig, da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Dick, thanks for being out here.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Peace
We
to you,
appreciate
yes.
your insight. Thank you so much. More on Joe Louis. Again, we have Joe Louis marching on again. This was the all-time great title run, the 25 title defenses coming up. Two-ton Tony Galento against Joe Louis.
Well, Joe, you sure mowed him down tonight, didn't you, boy?
I did.
What blow do you think put him away?
A right hand.
And what now, Joe?
Well, I guess whoever did pick for me.
How about Tony Galento?
I'll fight him.
Lou Nova?
He's a good fighter.
How about Maxie Bear?
Well, I'll fight Bear, too.
Well, Joe, you're willing to fight any of them, aren't you?
I will.
Right.
Welcome back to Ringside. Joe Louis from Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. One of the most colorful characters to ever challenge for the heavyweight title was two-ton Tony Galento. Galento claimed that he trained on beer, hamburgers, and spaghetti. A larger-than-life character, Galento would later gain a modicum of fame playing Truck in the movie On the Waterfront. But his greatest claim to fame in the ring came against Joe Louis. The lightly regarded Galento was seen as just another bum-of-the-month contender. But when two-ton Tony Galento decided to take the fight and his lethal left hook to the champion, the result was an unexpected toe-to-toe slugfest. To the shock of the mob at Yankee Stadium, two-ton Tony Galento uncoiled from his crouch and pounced on Louis early in the first round. After the wake-up call to the champion, Galento continued to fight toe-to-toe, knowing his only chance against Joe would be a knockout. But in round two, the rotund contender was flattened. Then in the third round, fighting with both eyes cut and blood dripping from his nose, Galento became the third man to drop Joe Louis. Would two-ton Tony be another Cinderella man? Referee Arthur Donovan said later, when Galento knocked Louis down, I could see the champion was badly hurt. And even though he jumped to his feet without a count, if Tony could land another left hook, he would have won the title. Instead, Galento's gallant charge and the specter of a stunning upset ended with a brutal Bronx beating in round four.
Galento is staggering. He goes over against the ropes. He's down on his knees. Galento is down. And Arthur Donovan stops the fight. Joe Louis is still champion of the world on a technical knockout. Arthur Donovan steps in and stops the fight.
Right into the camera, Tony. Don't look at me. They should have let me fight my own fight. I should have went out and fought a rough fight. Not like they want me to fight low, be careful. I don't want to be careful. I want to take a few and get one over and knock him dead. I hit him a light punch and knocked him out. And knocked him down. I'd have knocked him out. I had him down twice.
You think Donovan was right in stopping the fight?
No, I should have knocked him out. That was my manager.
Good. All right, hold it. You think you had him when you knocked him down, Tony?
Sure, I only had a light punch and knocked his bum down.
6 months after the Galento scare, Louis took on the South America heavyweight title holder, Arturo Godoy. Now there were doubts to Joe Louis's invincibility after the colorful heavyweight from Chile went the distance in a 15-round fight. Godoy won over the crowd at Madison Square Garden, prancing around the ring, pressing and mocking the listless Louis throughout the bout. Round after round would end with Godoy skipping to his stool while Louis would trudge head down to his corner. It would end with a cascade of booing after a split decision was awarded to Joe Louis.
The decision, winner and still world heavyweight champion, Joe Louis.
A day after the fight, promoter Mike Jacobs hinted that Godoy had galvanized the heavyweight division, saying, quote, "Before yesterday, it looked as if we'd never find anybody to stand up against Louis. And now, because of what Godoy did, I can put the champion in against any one of 9 contenders." Coming up next, Louis Godoy 2, a fight that produced another wild finish. And later, the Brown Bomber takes on the Pittsburgh Kid, Billy Conn, in one of the greatest heavyweight fights of all time. It's all ahead on ESPN Classics Ringside. Joe Louis. Back here, classic ringside, Joe Louis, Brian Kenny with Bert Sugar and Angelo Dundee. And now we're ready for the rematch. Joe Louis taking on Arturo Godoy. A rematch. In the first fight, Bert, was a split decision. How close was that fight?
Godoy did all manner of things, none of which were boxing, it seemed. He ducked, he crouched, he moved, he ran. He literally ran. Joe Louis, after the fight, said, "I don't do well in track meets." I mean, he had to run after him, and yet it was a split decision. Godoy was so happy he'd lasted 15 rounds as a Chilean, as you will, champion, that he kissed Joe Louis after the fight. He was so excited. Now he gets a rematch. This ain't gone well for Arturo Godoy. Once was enough. Tommy Farr found that out in Lewis's first defense. He went 15 rounds and said, "I don't want any more." In fact, Farr once said, "Every time I hear the name Joe Louis, my nose bleeds." Godoy should have taken a lesson.
How good was Arturo Godoy, Angelo?
Good fighter, smart, slick, stayed in there, the distance with the guy, never got dropped. But see what a difference a fight will make? Joe Louis found out about this guy, and he straightened him out the second time.
Yeah, Louis in rematches was excellent. Everyone who had a rematch shouldn't have.
This is in Yankee Stadium. Godoy, 53 wins in his career. Joe Louis, of course, the one loss, that to Max Schmeling, heavyweight champion at this point, 45-1. And this now is a prime vintage Joe Louis.
Yes, he's right at the edge of his prime career. I mean, his career might have peaked at the second Schmeling on through 1940. Here we are. But Joe Louis is just unbelievable in rematches. He learns something, and here he learns, if you're going to duck at me, I'm going to uppercut you, and guess what's happening here? And the irony is that this is not the last time they meet, albeit it's the last time officially, because after Louis retires, he takes a worldwide tour through South America, which is inconsistency, a South American tour, not worldwide, fighting exhibitions against Arturo Godoy. They must fight 25 exhibitions.
Really?
For big purses throughout South America. Because Arturo Godoy, off of this fight, or the two fights, becomes a big hero in South America.
How good or bad, or unfair or fair, is the Bum of the Month Club, that whole title?
Both. It was, Jack Miley called it that because Joe Louis fought 6 times in 6 months between December of 1940 and May of 41 in 6 different cities against 6 different opponents, some of whom shouldn't have been. I mean, there was a Johnny Paycheck, and he was a bellhop in the Des Moines Hotel, who was a big hero in Des Moines, Iowa.
There's a lot of bellhops and pretty tough guys, though, Bert. All right, Angelo, what are your thoughts on the Bum of the Month Club?
I resent that because as a fighter, if a kid's a fighter, he can't be a bum. You got to be a special individual to be a fighter. I blow my stack when I hear that because it's one-on-one. Anything can happen. Any bum could get lucky. There's no bum in a month.
And also, well, that's it. And very few fighters in any division at any point in the sport have cleaned house in their division.
Oh, like
and you're cleaning it out.
Angelo has heard this story, and it refers to one of his fighters. When a young Cassius Clay was mouthing off to Joe Louis one time about how great he was, Joe Louis just looked at him and he said, "You know, I had a Bum of the Month Club, pause, and you'd have been in it."
Let me tell you, I had that problem with Muhammad when he fought Spinks. He said, "How guy with 7 fight going to beat me? You crazy?" I said, "It's a tough fight. Anybody can lick anybody. That's why boxing is so intricate."
Yeah, this fight coming up now is a fun fight, a fascinating fight. Buddy Bear, who we've seen earlier, the giant 18-year-old kid with Max Bear. Here's Buddy Bear, and the hook puts Joe Louis out of the ring, Bert. Out of the ring.
Out goes Louis. Out goes Louis. And he just walks back in as if nothing happened.
Hey, Angelo, quite a recovery where Louis basically said, "Well, I better get back in the ring." I mean, after being put out by a hook.
And on his head.
Yeah.
And on his head.
This is fantastic. And when I'm watching Buddy Bear trying to block a right hand with his shoulder, my God, Joe Louis loves that. Boom, right down the pike. That's where he nailed him. Can't block a Joe Louis right hand. It's a picture punch.
Bert, how good is Buddy Bear? Clearly a big, strong kid. What type of fighter?
He's lost some fights up to this. I remember Buddy Bear best as being in Spartacus as the giant who wrestles the lion to save, the slaves. I mean, he was just tough. He was just big. He was bigger than Primo Carnera, and we always thought he was a giant. But no, he was just big. But he could hit. And as you saw in that first round, here he goes down second time. Now there's an interesting incident coming up because Buddy Bear, not Max, this is his younger brother, gets up. The round basically is over. They're already in the ring, and Lewis lands a punch after the bell.
At the same time, the referee claps his hands as if to say, all right, fight, with the symbol of mix it up. Now, we can't hear the bell on this film, but it doesn't appear to be a dirty move by Lewis, unless the bell was that much earlier.
No, it wasn't
it's
dirty.
hard to really discern on the tape.
Nobody ever claimed it was dirty, but it was after the bell from all the...
Referee, though, it looked back, went, Angelo, when a referee goes like this or goes, what does that mean? Fight.
Well, maybe he's just applauding. He's having a good time.
It's a heck of a right hand, Joe, yeah.
But what he was doing, he was admiring the artistry of Joe Lewis.
but it leads to something. Buddy Bear's corner, claiming foul, will not let him out for the 7th round, and it goes in as a DQ, a disqualification of Buddy Bear, not Joe Lewis.
Referee.
Right. Well, his corner coming in illegally. Right.
Well,
but you're right. If you were really, if they really thought that was an illegal shot, but you know what? Right. Common sense tells you, the legal shots were more than enough on Buddy Bear. Get him out.
Yeah, but
at that point,
it became enough for a rematch.
Go ahead, Angelo.
The manager said, "Say foul, but don't say nothing too much. We want to get paid after the fight."
That's a good point. All right. Guys, again, coming up here, 1941, one of the most famous fights in the history of the sport. Joe Lewis taking on the former light heavyweight champion of the world, Billy Conn.
Conn built up a great crowd of people. The publicity was quite great. The odds were 2-1, 3-1 that Lewis would beat him. But the crowd, the people who just loved fighting, those people wanted to see Conn win.
You never expected Joe Lewis to lose. You didn't bet against U.S. Steel or Joe Lewis.
Back here on Classic Ringside, Joe Lewis, and of course, one of the most famous heavyweight fights of all time. We're getting ready for it right now. Joe Lewis versus the former light heavyweight champion of the world, Billy Conn. Right now, here's sports writer Bill Knack on the build-up for that fight.
In a sport that was evolving from what had been a white sport, the Jack Sharkey Dempsey kind of sport, into Max Baer sport, into a black sport, here was now an indestructible black champion in Joe Lewis that white people loved because he was a universally admired and respected and loved person. But now suddenly you've got this light heavyweight from Pittsburgh who's good looking, he's got a beautiful wife, he represents, you know, the working class American white guy, and he's Irish, and Lewis loved him. Lewis thought he was terrific, and they were friends for the rest of their lives and admired the hell out of him. You know, Joe Lewis had never found himself in a tougher boxing match than he found himself in with Conn. That was not a phony.
Yes, indeed. Billy Conn, former light heavyweight champion, the Pittsburgh Kid. We're now joined. We have Angelo Dundee, Bert Sugar still with us. Lou Duva joins us here on Classic Ringside. Good to have you here, Lou.
Good to be with you, Brian.
So you were in training camps as a kid, as a pup. Right. You were there, Pompton Lakes, and saw the great Joe Lewis there. Bill Knack is there talking about things are still thought of racially. What was the view there in New Jersey at the camp of Joe Lewis?
Well, I used to caddy in the morning there, like 6:30 in the morning, grab a double, go out there, get done at 11 o'clock, go out to the highway, hitchhike up to Pompton Lakes. There was never, as far as Joe was concerned, with the people there, and they're still there, and the diner is still there where he eat every morning. There was never no animosity among them. There was never no problem. There was no color line over there. It was Joe Lewis, a man, understand? And he treated people. You couldn't imagine what he did, Brian, up there with the kids. Even with the kids in the theaters, he used to buy them ice cream. I mean, a woman got killed up there. Only because they didn't have an ambulance available. He went out to box exhibitions just so they could raise funds. Bought an ambulance. I mean, he bought a tower for the chief of police up there, for the whole section up there. He used to run through town in the morning doing his road work and stop in a third diner. Right now, remember, there wasn't no black in the town. Pompton Lakes, I live next door to in Wayne. That's white, understand? But Joe Lewis, there was no color line. He conquered that. He really conquered that. Not only did he do it in the ring, he did it outside the ring.
Angelo, how good was Billy Conn? Your thoughts on him as a fighter?
Conn was a pure, beautiful boxer, smart, slick, mess up anybody. He was a big, tall guy, and he can dictate and handle everybody. He was a premier boxer. Beautiful.
Billy Conn was coming in, Bert, 174. Joe Louis at this point, 199.
No. Billy Conn came in 169. Joe Louis came in 204. Mike Jacobs had it announced in the ring at 199, 175 to make it look like the disparity wasn't that great. Therefore, the official weights are what's announced.
So Conn is not even at the light heavyweight limit.
He was a light man. What he did, though, his fight, and I agree with Angie, Billy Conn could fight like a predecessor fighter, Barney Ross. He could throw punches and get the dickens out of there before anybody could retaliate. And he had never been knocked out. In fact, in an earlier fight against a fighter named Oscar Rankins in Pittsburgh, he had been knocked down in the second round, didn't remember the rest of the fight, went back to his dressing room and apologized to his manager, Johnny Ray. Sorry, I was knocked out. Johnny said, you won the fight. He didn't remember it. He had never been knocked out. He had great recuperative powers and was fast as a dickens.
Now, was this seen as, well, this is going to be a blowout, this guy's too small,
No.
or did a lot of people in the know think this guy's got a real shot at Joe Louis?
A lot of writers were picking Billy Conn. Willard Mullen picked him. Of course, he was Irish. But Hybigo, a lot of writers picked Billy Conn. He was the shortest underdog since the second Schmeling fight to Louis. He was thought to have a good chance.
Lou, what type of shot will people give him Billy Conn at this point?
I had to go with Joe Louis. You know, he was a good fighter, Billy Conn, good boxer, got good left hand. But I had to go along with. I figured that he would catch him up later, and you know, and he did. But up until that time, it was life and death with him. I mean, the guy was really putting on the fight. He was winning the fight.
Yeah.
He was winning the fight.
Angelo?
You know what happens? You know, you say, big guy can't beat a good little guy. Little guy, as good as he is, can't beat a big guy. That was the axiom in boxing.
Yeah.
But that was theory up to this
That was
That's
the
right.
theory.
And,
theory.
and would it change again? You're going to get to see it for yourself. Let's go to it right now. Again, Billy Conn, former light heavyweight champion, moving way up in weight to take on the champion, Joe Louis. Here's round one.
There's the bell, Don Dumpty. Thank you, Bill Corum. They advance very slowly to the center of the ring. Conn, as expected, is dancing around. Louis is trying to crowd him into a corner. Conn almost slips, moving around very fast. Louis jabs with the left, it's blocked. Conn jabs with his own left, it's short of the mark. Louis is trying to get Conn into that corner, and both the boys, as Bill told you before, are wearing purple trunks. They wouldn't give in one to the other. Louis is short with another left jab. Not a blow landed so far. Another left by Louis is short of the mark. The race-like Conn still keeps moving around the ring. Louis trying to get him into a corner. Conn didn't even have to block that one. He wasn't there when it came. Conn short with another left jab, and Louis trying to get him into that corner. Conn is down, but it's not from a punch. He jabbed at Louis and slipped, and Louis didn't even hit him on the way down. It's not going to be a knockdown. Referee Eddie Joseph's moving around a very fast fight, but little blows landed. Louis is short with his left jab. He's still trying to get Conn in there, and Conn won't accommodate him. And there's the bell for round one.
Stay tuned for more of the 1941 Joe Louis-Billy Conn championship fight. See how Conn rebounds from a shaky start and has the Bomber in serious trouble. Later, Lou Duva joins Angelo Dundee in breaking down the twin tussles with Jersey Joe Walcott as Louis extends his winning streak after the war. And don't miss the Battle of the Titans as Louis takes on the Brockton blockbuster Rocky Marciano, the finale to Joe Louis's pro career. This is Ringside from Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. This is Ringside, Joe Louis. When the Bomber saw Billy Conn spar before their first fight, he told reporters, "The boy likes to fight. I can see that. Didn't know he was so rough." Here's round three. Louis versus Conn 1. Keep it tuned to ESPN Classic for more of the Joe Louis-Billy Conn 1941 fight from Yankee Stadium. Conn staggers the champ in round 12. Can he finish him off? Later, ring icons Angelo Dundee and Lou Duva join Bert Sugar for memories of Joe Louis's brawls against Jersey Joe Walcott, Ezzard Charles, and Rocky Marciano. This is Ringside. Big fights, bad blood, and bodacious tales from Gleason's Gym. Welcome back to Ringside. Joe Louis. Billy Conn, the Pittsburgh Kid, held the world light heavyweight title from 1939 to 1941. He gave up that belt to move up a weight class to challenge Louis. And through the first 9 rounds, Conn was giving the champion all he could handle. The fight was witnessed by 54,000 people in the Polo Grounds, but millions more were listening on radio, including the crowd and the players at the Pirates-Giants game at Forbes Field in Pittsburgh. The game was held up in the 4th inning so the fans could listen to the broadcast of the fight over the PA system. Because of the delay, the game was called in the 11th inning and declared a tie because no inning could be started after 11:50 p.m. Let's get back to the action. Louis-Conn, round 10.
Joe Louis for the heavyweight championship of the world at the Polo Grounds in New York. Conn jabs away with the left. It's short of the mark. Louis comes in now, fighting harder with the left jab to Conn's jaw. Conn goes into a clinch. Louis hooks the left to the body, and Conn digs his own left into the champion's midsection. Louis jabs twice with the left hand to Conn's chin. Conn takes the blows, goes into a clinch, tries to get his hands free in the infighting, but of course Joe ties him up at this stage. Louis going after Conn now a bit more seriously than he did a few rounds ago. Louis takes 2 left jabs thrown by Billy Conn in quick succession. Conn jabs the left and hooks the left to Joe's chin. Louis after him now, takes the left hook to the jaw, a light one thrown by Billy Conn. Louis jabs the left to Conn's chin. In close, the honors are about even as they flail each other in the midsection. There's Louis trying to stalk Conn into a corner again, jabbing twice with the left, which is partially blocked, hooking a left to Conn's jaw. Conn slips to the canvas once again, and very gentlemanly, Louis doesn't even try to land a blow. Very nice, Joe, and the crowd appreciates it. Now they're fighting again. A left hook to the jaw thrown by Billy Conn. Louis comes back in, jabs the left to Conn's chin. Conn is short with his own left jab, with a left and a right to the body. They're locking arms in the center of the ring. Louis hooks the left to the body and crosses the right to the jaw. Believe me, when this Billy stops walking, he really fights. A left hook to the jaw by Conn, and a left to the body, a right uppercut scored by Billy Conn. In close, Louis comes back with 2 hard left hands to the jaw and a right uppercut right on Conn's chin. There's Conn coming back with a left to the body, and they really mixed it in that round. Round 11, and with each passing minute, it takes on more the appearance of a tough fight for either boy. Louis and Conn out in the center of the ring once again. Conn goes into a clinch and ties up the champion, hooks the left to Joe's body. Louis tries to get the right hand free, but Conn blocks the blow. Another left hook to the head by Billy Conn, and Louis forces Conn into the ropes, but can't seem to get his hands free as Conn ties him up. A right uppercut to the jaw scored by Joe Louis, and Conn comes back with a right to the body, another right to the body, and a left hook to the body by Conn. A right to the body, a left hook to the jaw, another right, and Conn is still swinging, and Louis hasn't landed a blow in this flurry. A left hook to the body, a right cross to the jaw, and Louis is worried. A left hook, another left hook by Billy Conn, and now Louis goes into a clinch and doesn't land a blow. He finally hooks the left to Conn's body. Conn ties him up and rips his own right to Louis's head. Louis forced Conn over to the ropes, and now they both seem very, very tired. Conn dances around in the center of the ring. It's round 11. Louis hooks the left to Conn's head at the bell. Oh, boy.
When we return, we'll have analysis of Conn's strategy and the explosive conclusion of the fight. This is Ringside. Joe Louis on ESPN Classic. All right, June 18th, 1941, an upset in the making. Through 11 rounds, Billy Conn has the lead on Joe Louis. It would get even better in round 12. Don Dunphy has the call on radio.
Round 12, 4 to go. The boys are out in the center of the ring. Heavyweight championship of the world at stake. Conn and Louis, no blows landed in round 12 so far. Louis jabs away with the left to Conn's chin. Conn dances around. Louis is after him, very serious. He's a very serious young man now, the champion is, as he crosses the right to Conn's jaw. Kahn doesn't seem to mind that blow, though, and goes into a clinch, which is broken almost immediately. Here's Lewis in there with a stinging left hand to the jaw, a jab, and Kahn takes a right cross to the jaw thrown by Joe Louis. Kahn rips the left hand to the body, and as Louis rips the left and the right to the head, Kahn covers up and partially blocks the blows. They lock arms out in the center of the ring. Louis pushes Kahn away from him, and in close, Kahn takes the right cross to the jaw thrown by Joe Louis and hooks his own left to the champion's chin. This bout's going to get faster as it goes along. We can see that. 4 rounds, less than 4 now. A left hook to the body is blocked by the challenger. Louis is staggered by a left hook. Kahn staggers Louis. Louis is railing around and holding on. A left hook to the jaw followed by a right cross, and the champion is hurt. A left hook to the jaw by Kahn goes over the head of Louis. Louis is trying to hold on. Kahn is battering him with a left and a right. Louis is dancing around in the center of the ring. Kahn hooks 2 left hooks to the jaw. Another left hook to the jaw by Kahn finds the mark, and he's wild with a third. Louis is hurt. Make no mistake of that. Kahn hooks the left to the jaw, and Louis paws with his left hand. And the crowd wondering what happened. A left hook to the jaw scored by Billy Kahn at the bell.
Whoa. All right, so there's round 12. Veteran stuff from Joe Louis, barely hanging on. Lou, let's start with you. Your thoughts. Crippling hook from Billy Kahn.
You know, I couldn't believe that he hit him a left hook like that there and staggered him. But and it was really something that Joe Louis comes back and starts taking him and starts putting pressure on him the next round. But he was ready to go.
Yeah, right there. He was hanging on, had a good grip on Kahn. Otherwise, he was going down. Angelo, your thoughts?
That was a shame. That was the undoing. But what it shows, it didn't have to be a heck of a punch to hurt you. It's the one you don't see that hurts you.
That's right.
That left hook.
And remember, Billy Kahn was not a great knockout puncher.
No back.
He was not a great knockout puncher.
No.
But Joe Louis goes to his corner, and his trainer, Jack Blackburn, says, Chappie, how do you feel? He said, that punch hurt. He says, you need a knockout. You can't win without a knockout. Get him. And that was setting the stage, as Lou alluded to the fateful 13th round. And remember, had this fight been under today's rules, it's over, it's 12 rounds, it's not 15, and Billy Kahn has won.
Right. And now Kahn is also emboldened, right? From that shot, he's thinking, wait a second. I see Louis, the knees are going, he's on the way
He's
out.
hanging on for dear life.
Yeah. Well, things are going to change, but again, this is what makes it a classic fight. Let's go back again. We've matched it up with the fight film and Don Dunphy with the call. Here's round 13.
Louis and Kahn out in the center of the ring. The referee, Eddie Josephs. Kahn beats Louis to the punch with a right cross to the jaw. And Louis goes to close quarters and ties up the challenger. Neither of the boys get the arms free, and the referee tells them to break. This is a dramatic fight all the way, and the photographers are sitting right on the apron of the ring, ready to snap a knockdown. A left jab to the jaw by Louis shakes up Billy just a little bit. Kahn is out in the center. As Louis jabs his left, Kahn blocks the blow with his own right hand. Louis paws away with his left, trying to get Kahn into a corner if he can. Kahn stands around in the center of the ring, just continually circling the champion. Louis sticks out a left hand, which is blocked by Billy Kahn. Kahn comes in close, crosses the right to the body of the champion. Louis doesn't seem to mind that blow. It didn't have much force behind it. Louis and Kahn out in the center of the ring. Not too much action in this round. Now they go to close quarters, and Kahn, after hooking a left to the body, brings up a left to the jaw of Joe Louis. Louis jabs away with his left. It's short of the mark, and now he jabs the left and crosses the right to Kahn's chin. Louis jabs another left to Kahn's chin. Kahn goes back out of danger. Louis jabs the left and hooks the right and staggers Billy Kahn with a right uppercut, and Kahn wisely holds on and ties up Louis. Louis hurts Kahn again with a left and a right to the jaw, but Kahn fights back with a right and a left to the body. Another right and a left to the body. A left hook to the jaw by Kahn. A right to the jaw. 2 more rights as he outswings the champion. Kahn was hurt, but he fought his way out of it. A left hook to the body by Billy Kahn, another left hook to the body, and a left to the jaw. And the challenger's blows to the midsection are seemingly slowing up Joe Louis. Billy's eye, the right eye is cut again, and there's Louis driving Kahn back with a right to the jaw. Louis jabbing the left to Kahn's jaw, and Kahn going to close quarters and tying up his opponent. Right in the center of the ring now. This is a fight. Kahn jabs the left and is staggered by a right cross thrown by Joe Louis. Kahn is hurt, but he bounds off the rope as Louis comes back with a right and a left to the body, and Kahn hooks the left to the jaw. A left hook to the jaw, right uppercut scored by Joe Louis, and still another one. Kahn every so often is staggered, but he comes fighting back. He's got remarkable recuperative powers. A right cross to the jaw by Louis, and Kahn hooks his own left to the jaw. And now Louis back to the attack with another right uppercut, as Kahn hooks the left to the jaw. A left jab to the jaw and a right cross scored by Joe Louis, and Kahn is hurt as Louis rips the right to the jaw. Kahn is staggering, but he won't go down. There's Louis jabbing a left and uppercutting his right to Kahn's head. Kahn blocks the left hook. He's railing around the ring. Louis hooks the left and the right to the jaw, and Kahn is down from a right cross to the jaw. He's taking the count. 4, 5, 6, 7. He's on his back. 8, 9. He's getting up at the... Oh, no! The referee says it's all over. The referee says it's all over. The bout is stopped. The winner and still champion, Joe Louis. But what a fight Billy Kahn gave.
Wow, and that fast, it all turns around. Fascinating there. Angelo, let me start with you. You talk about being emboldened, where in the middle of that round, Kahn puts it to Joe Louis once again. So I think at some point he figured, I can slug with this guy.
What a big mistake. And the mistake was when he kept slugging with him, he made the mistake of backing up. He was moving left, smart fight. He was out thinking. But then he backed up. You don't back up from Joe Louis because he sets you up and he gets you out of there.
Go ahead, Luke.
I did the same thing while I was watching over there. I noticed he was going in straight. He was trying to punch with Joe. Joe was just leaning over and throwing short combinations. He had to hit those bombs off it. If he turns and he turns and he turns, he don't get hit those air punches there. But I thought that this should show that the light heavyweights of yesteryear, what they were doing with heavyweights. Today they don't do that. I mean, a light heavyweight is like any kind of a weight, but they don't fight the real heavyweights. They don't fight the real heavyweights. He fought the real heavyweight.
Yeah, he did, and great hand speed, too. We're watching Bert that round, and we're thinking, look at the hand speed of Billy Kahn.
Billy Kahn, as you said, was emboldened and made a mistake. In fact, afterwards, Jesse Abramson of the Herald Tribune, New York Herald Tribune, goes in the dressing room and said, Billy, you had him for 12 rounds. What happened? Billy Kahn, being the imp he was, just looked at Jesse and said, what's the sense of being Irish if you can't be stupid? In other words, he just went in there to knock him out. And he had him, but he had himself, too, because he was trapped in that briar patch that says, I'm coming into you and I'm coming into your firepower. I mean, this was a great turnaround, and had it but been 3 seconds later, he went down. Ends at 2:58 of the 12th or the 13th round, 2:58. In those days, when the bell rang, that was the end of the count.
Right.
So no matter if he's still on the floor, there is a 14th round. Now, there is a great hue and cry for a rematch.
Got to do this one again, one would think, but a lot of things would intervene. You would figure this fight would come off once again. Of course, a great fight, a thrilling fight, even down to that final round. But here, listening to an interview with Billy Kahn Jr., Billy Kahn's son, talking about why that fight didn't happen until much later. Here it is.
My dad was training, and then he got in an altercation with my grandfather, who hadn't spoken to them for like a year because they got married. And then my brother was born, and my grandfather was real successful. He had a lot of money, so he had a real big christening, and he invited all the dignitaries in Pittsburgh there, Art Rooney, the mayor, the commissioners, everybody. But it was all a setup to get him into the house and get him into a fight. He never forgot. That's the way my grandfather was. He's a little crazy, And so they're there, and he starts picking on my dad. So my dad senses trouble. So he said, I'll be back. He tried to get out the back door, and it was locked. So my grandfather locked all the doors. So he comes into the kitchen. He said, I could beat you anytime, any place, anywhere. My grandfather, my dad's like trapped. He said, I don't want to fight. All right, let's just bury the hatchet. He said, too late for that. And then he just went after my dad. My dad, for right here, was an incredible fight. I mean, everything in the kitchen was broken. Art Rooney broke his ankle trying to stop the fight. Milton Jaffe was there. That was my dad's manager. Someone pushed him, and there was chairs broken, and And I don't know who broke up the fight, but I think they called the police.
So that fight was supposed to happen in 1942. How busted up was Billy Conn after that fight with his father-in-law?
Well, the father-in-law was upset, and let me tell you why. He was a feisty man. He had played shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was known as a fighter on the field. He had tried to keep his daughter, the beautiful-looking Mary, away from Billy Conn. It was beneath him. Put her in a convent. Billy eloped with her at the age of 16. Here at 18, she has a child, and he's still upset. This is the christening of the child that's going on. They get into a fight, they end up falling down the stairs swinging at each other. Billy hurts his hand, his arm, his shoulder, everything. The heck with the old man, he's breaking everything anyway. The fight is now in jeopardy. They still try to put it on in 1942, the year afterwards. Now, because it's wartime, the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, turns it down even though they want to donate the profits to charity. It's too big a fight. It's too much a distraction. America isn't winning at this point anyway. Why allow a heavyweight championship fight? And it therefore doesn't happen again till 1946, not 42, this great 1941 fight.
All right, we're going to see that fight later on, so we'll take a break right now. More on the Lewis-Conn rematch, again from 1946. Plus, we've got the world champions taking on an aging Joe Louis after the war. Jersey Joe Walcott, Ezzard Charles, and of course later, Rocky Marciano versus Joe Louis. This is ESPN Classics Ringside. Joe Louis back at Gleason's gym right after this.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Welcome back to Ringside. Joe Louis from Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali are always prominently featured in any debate about the best heavyweight champion of all time. And while most boxing fans recognize that Ali lost his peak years when he was stripped of his title for refusing to serve in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, it should be noted Louis lost many of his prime years when he joined the armed forces to serve in World War II. Just prior to his induction into the military, Louis made a remarkable gesture. He voluntarily put his heavyweight title on the line in 1942 for charity, fighting Buddy Bear. Louis received no purse for the fight. All his proceedings went to the Navy Relief Society. During the pre-fight introductions, Wendell Willkie, the 1940 Republican Party presidential candidate, declared, quote, "Joe Louis, your magnificent example in risking your championship belt, won literally with toil and sweat and tears, prompts us to say, we thank you. And in view of your attitude, it is impossible for us to see how any American can think of discrimination in terms of race, creed, or color." This from Wilfred Smith of the Chicago Daily Tribune. 2 minutes and 50 seconds after Buddy Bear charged from his corner, seeking the heavyweight championship of the world, the streaked lightning and thunderous power of Joe Louis's fists stretched the challenger on the floor. 3 times in those thrill-jammed seconds, Louis smashed at Bear with the homicidal fury that had felled Max Schmeling in a round. Madison Square Garden was bedlam. A vast roar swept from wall to wall and reverberated from the steel beams as the champion moved irresistibly to the attack, as certainly as darkness follows daylight. Finally, when Louis stepped back from his beaten foe, his hand raised in victory, all joined in tumultuous applause for the man who has now defended his championship 20 times and is regarded as invincible. Just 5 days after his first-round KO of Buddy Bear on January 14th, 1942, Joe Louis reported to Camp Upton, New York, and was inducted into the United States Army. When we return, we'll review Louis's service to his country, and we'll have more of Bert Sugar's conversation with the champion's son, Joe Louis Barrow Jr. That's all ahead on Ringside. Joe Louis, here on ESPN Classic. Welcome back to Ringside. Joe Louis from Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. On January 14th, 1942, Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion of the world, reported to Camp Upton, New York for his induction into the U.S. Army. Like all other African Americans at the time, Louis was assigned to the black barracks. Segregation still prevailed in most American institutions and society, And not even Lewis, one of the world's biggest and most respected stars, was exempt from this institutionalized racism. He would later tell a reporter at the time, referring to the camp's segregation policy, quote, "This is the real battlefield." Here is part 2 of Bert Sugar's conversation with Joe Louis Barrow Jr.
Joe, quick question. Joe Louis, your dad's career, was interrupted for good reason. He'd had all the ring wars. Now he goes off after the Buddy Bear fight, where he fought for the Army Relief. 1-round knockout. The next day, he goes into the service, effectively freezing or quasi-freezing the title. And he does tours. He boxes exhibitions in, as I'm given to understand, North Africa, France, almost everywhere they call for him, throughout the whole of Europe. And yet, he had entered a segregated army with segregated camps where he was boxing. And yet, I think I read in your book on Joe Louis the fact that he unsegregated the audience. How did he do that?
Well, when he traveled to these exhibitions, and Bert, he conducted some 96 exhibitions and entertained some 3 million troops during the course of his service in the Army. He felt an obligation. He wanted to do that. But when he would go to camps, particularly in the United States where there was segregation and the black soldiers couldn't sit in front, he literally would call his friend Truman Gibson, and he worked in the Pentagon with the generals, and they would get things right. So many people would, from time to time, comment that Joe Louis didn't do much for segregation.
One of whom was Muhammad Ali, who called him an Uncle Tom.
Yes. They just didn't understand that my father was a very quiet man. He wasn't a Martin Luther King. He wasn't going to stand on the podium, but he knew what prejudice was. He knew what segregation was. And he didn't like the fact that it was carried on into the Army. Here are people serving their country, dying for the country, and it just wasn't acceptable to him. So whenever he encountered that, he made it known that it was a segregated army and that the black troops were not being treated correctly, and he would do something about it.
There was a story that had there not been a Joe Louis, there would not have been a Jackie Robinson.
That's right. And there's no question about that. I mean, because Joe Louis allowed white America to love a black man. And it gave Blanche Rickey the freedom to bring a black Jackie Robinson into the major leagues.
But before that, at Fort Riley, during the war, Jackie Robinson had refused to move even as a lieutenant to the back of the bus.
That's right.
When some white driver demanded it.
That's right.
And in effect, he was up for court-martial because of it.
That's right.
And who stepped in?
My father stepped in. My father stepped in because he was a very close friend to Jackie Robinson. And he stepped in and basically said to the generals that let's just move on. And they did. And because of the respect that they had for my father, and because of what my father had done for the Army, and because of the exhibitions, and because of what he had done, they respected my father's request to let Jackie move on for that. And then he talked to Jackie, I remember this, and said, "You need to settle down because I can't be doing this all the time, and I can't cover your back when I'm in Europe."
But he also came up with a slogan for World War II.
He did. And we're going to win because we're on God's side.
Which is not exactly what the Germans were saying.
That's right.
They're going to win because God's on their side, which is a tiny bit presumptuous.
That's right.
I mean, he would always have a way, and that World War II slogan was one of them.
I think that's really one other thing that just endeared so many people to him, because he was a very soft-spoken, man of few words.
And he was a hero not only to the boxing public, but to the country. Not only for his war efforts and for being himself and for being giving. They gave him a Distinguished Civilian Cross and medal. And when he passed, he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, which I'm given to understand has certain rules and regulations that really didn't abide and apply to your father.
Yes, because of the World War II veterans who were passing and the Vietnam veterans who had died as well, they changed the regulations on how you can be buried in Arlington, and you had to have served in the Army for 20 years, or you had to die in the service of your country. So President Ronald Reagan made an exception so that Joe Louis could be buried in the Arlington National Cemetery because he felt that he was an American hero, and he should be buried with other great American heroes who had served their country.
There'll be more with Joe right here on Ringside a little bit later in the program.
Stay tuned to Ringside. Ahead, Joe Louis returns from the war on a warpath. See the Brown Bomber put out a statement knockout at Yankee Stadium in his rematch with Billy Conn. Then it's two entertaining fights with Hall of Famer Jersey Joe Walcott, as the great Louis finds a vintage fistic flurry for a lights-out pummeling in their 1948 rematch.
There's no doubt in our mind that Joe Louis is ready. The fans visit his Pompton Lakes, New Jersey training camp to see the Brown Bomber whip into shape, and I mean shape, for his coming bout with Billy Conn. Starting from the ground up, the world's champ keeps his sparring partner's polo lady busy these pre-fight days. No punches are pulled around here. Joe knows he'll have a fight in his hands at New York's Yankee Stadium when that bell rings. Mike Jacobs, the promoter, keeps an eye on both the champion and challenger. At Greenwood Lake, New Jersey, Conn gets after his waistline as he readies for the long-awaited return bout with Louis. Last time, Billy thrilled the fight fans with his doughty 13-round slugfest, and his backers predict more of the same this time.
Lou, Billy Conn and Joe Louis met up during the war, right?
Yeah.
What was those,
they met
what were those
on
conversations
one of
like?
when they were, in the Army and all that. And his famous line that I know he was the right guy. He was a man of his word. And Billy Conn says, I could have won that fight, if you would let me go a little longer. He says, I loaned it to you for 12 rounds and you didn't know what to do with it.
Right. Just wanted the title for a little while.
Well, they could have made a lot of money. And the public was ready for this fight. Remember, we had 4 years of rationing, deprivation during the war, and now you have free money after the war. And Mike Jacobs raises the price of the ringside seats to the unheard of $100. And yet, in 4 years, both of them have lost something. Conn, a little bit more.
What is different then? Oh, first, let's talk about Joe Louis. Bert, what's going on with Joe Louis here as far as his debts begin? The troubles with the IRS have already begun. Why?
In 1942, he fought a fight for the Navy relief with the rematch with Buddy Bear. He fought a fight for Army relief against Abe Simon, his last two fights before going in the service. Donated his purses. Even Wendell Wilkie was in the ring to thank him for contributing his money, donating it. And then for some reason that nobody understands, his income tax form was filled out because he had just lost a manager to death. Julian Black is in prison, his other half manager. And somebody prepared his income tax and marked down the entire purse he should have gotten as earnings rather than donations. So now he's taxed on that and the interest on the penalties on the tax, and the meter runs. And nobody corrects it, either on the government side or on his side.
And so interest is compounding. This seems like a terrible injustice to someone who did all this work, charity work, Lou.
Absolutely. That's the only thing I can never get over, Bert. And for what he did, they still pestered him. They still kept on top of him. They still wanted their money to the government. He donated all that money for the government.
And not only that, he gave the government the line for the war. Somebody had given him the line to say at one of these charity events, we will win because we're on God's side, which is rather presumptuous. And he looked at it and he said, we'll win because God's on our side. And that became the slogan for the war. Mm-hmm. So here's the man who gave up his purses for the war,
right?
Who made the slogan for the war, who toured the USO camps for the goodwill for the war, and the government is after him.
And never let up on him, up on him. And nobody ever got through to the government and say, hey, come on, do the right thing. They never did the right thing.
And do you think they would have done this if this had been a white man?
Yeah, no, that is one of the great injustices of the whole thing as Louis gets on later in life. Right here, though, in this fight, Angelo, your thoughts, as this is very different. Billy Conn is also not the same fighter when they meet here in 1946.
Yeah, but Joe Louis didn't take him cheap. I saw that sparring session. He had a great light heavyweight in with him, a tall, skinny guy, could move. So Joe Louis was taking this fight serious. He definitely knew Khan was going to give him a problem with this boxing and his movement.
And he slipped there. Khan slips a couple times during the fight, and Louis helps him up. Afterwards, Khan said he's a gentleman, but he's not gentle, because he's beating the bejabbers out of Khan. Khan is not anything like he was. He's a mere shadow of himself.
This is the first 7 rounds, highlights of this fight. Again, this is 1946, June 19th. And Khan, how productive was he or active was he during the war? What was he doing exactly?
He had one fight after the last Louis fight, a decision win over Tony Zale. And then he just goes in the service. So for 4 years, he has no fights.
Besides his father-in-law, which was
no
contest?
No, I can't find that in the record book.
A no contest down the stairs.
Look at the spread there. He's boxing Tony Zale, and he's up to Joe Louis.
That is crazy.
Joe Louis down to Tony Zale.
Where was Tony Zale at that point in his career?
Tony Zale was past his prime, but he still had 3 great fights left called Rocky Graziano. But you know, Tony Zale, as Lou points out, was a middleweight.
Yeah.
He was a middleweight champion. Now he goes all the way. Remember, Billy Khan was such a great fighter. By the age of 20, he'd beaten 4 champions, Apostoli and Yaros and others. He beat them all from A to Z, except he couldn't beat an L called Louis.
At that size as well. That's the first 7 rounds. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get the vintage finish. Again, Joe Louis at his best in the rematch, 1946 with Billy Khan. We're back right after this. Brian Kenny back here. It's Ringside Joe Louis from Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn. Once again, of course, the first fight between Joe Louis and Billy Khan, one of the most dramatic in boxing history. The rematch 5 years later, Joe Louis in total control. Before this fight, this is when he said it. Louis saying of Khan, he can run, but he can't hide. In round 8, no more running, no more hiding. Here we go.
Aimed at the chin, and the crowd gasped at the force of the punch. There's Khan shooting a left jab at the chin. Louis puts out a left jab that pops Khan's head back, and Khan shoots a left hand and then takes a left hook on the jaw when the left jab is short. Again, Louis is in with a left jab on the mouth of Billy Khan. Khan backing toward a neutral corner, shoots a right hand over the head and takes a grazing right at the jaw by Joe Louis. Out in the center of the ring once again, Khan shoots a left jab on the nose. Khan has done very little body punching in this bout. In the last one, he did a lot of it. Louis is coming in at him. Khan hooks a left to the head and takes a return right on the head from Louis. Louis puts out a hard left jab, another left jab on the mouth, a left and a right to the jaw by Louis, and Khan fights back with a left hook to the body and takes a countering right by Louis on the chin. Khan was hurt there for a moment, but he takes a good punch. Louis is short with a left hand. Khan comes back with a left to the body and is tagged with a solid right to the jaw and a right to the head, a left hook to the jaw by Louis, and Khan moves in very cautiously as he shoots a left hand to the body. The timing of the champion was almost perfect that time. Khan is smiling once again. Here's Louis coming after him. Louis is short with a left, short with another left hand, and the crowd is yelling to Khan, Billy, move around fast. Khan shoots a right over the head and brings up a short right chop to the jaw, but takes a left jab, and Khan is staggered by a right to the jaw and a left hook to the chin, and Khan is down on his back. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's trying to get up. 8, 9, and it's all over.
All right, so Joe Louis takes care of business there against Billy Khan. The electricity seemed to be gone from Khan at this point. Lou, what are your thoughts on that?
I thought he went back. You know, those years in between, you never know what went on, and he wasn't the same guy when he come back into that ring. When he fought the first time, he was a good light heavyweight, fighting a good heavyweight, but he had the moves, he had the punch, he fought good. But coming back there, he just didn't have that spark.
You know what happened, Brian? Here's the premier boxer getting outboxed. Joe Louis was sticking that jab in his face. Hey, man, what am I doing? I'm the boxer. This guy's kicking the heck out of me with that jab. So Louis was well prepared for the fight. He didn't take it cheap.
He took the fight right to him.
But that's the strategy. Angie is on it. By this time, Joe Louis's trainer is Manny Seaman. And Manny has devised a plan. Rather than you're coming out like you did in the first fight to bomb him, box him.
Boxing.
And Khan didn't know what the hell to do.
Nothing discourages a boxer more when you kick a heck out of him with his own equipment. I'm boxing
His own
the
game.
guy.
Where did Billy Khan go from here, Bert?
He had a couple more fights, but basically his career was through.
No, but he was refereeing.
Listen.
And he did us a big favor. His manager, Mill Jaffe, got a hotel in Vegas. I used to get free rooms there. The Stardust Hotel.
got free rooms.
That was terrific. And let me tell you,
Anytime it was free rooms, Angie's
He
okay.
owns it.
but Brian, he became a referee. So
Yeah.
he said, I'm going to Mexico City. I'm working with Sugar Ramos against Carlos Ortiz. So Billy's there at the weigh-in. I walk into the weigh-in. He said, what are you doing here? He said, I'm with the good guy, Sugar Ramos. He said, oh! Stops the fight. He almost got killed. They were throwing pesos at him. The ring fell down. It was a historical fight, really.
It sounds like an hysterical fight.
That's
not
how it
historical.
Historical. He put a bucket over his head. The pesos didn't get him.
No, you're supposed to hold it the other way up.
That's a good point. Bert would have been on that.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back again, Joe Louis finally getting and disposing of Billy Khan after the war. When we come back, Joe Louis against a master boxer, Jersey Joe Walcott. We'll have that on Classic Ringside. Joe Louis right after this. Welcome back to the Joe Louis Marathon here on ESPN Classic. 3 months after winning his 1946 rematch with Billy Khan, the Brown Bomber took on the pride of the Bronx, Tammy Moriello. The journeyman heavyweight stunned the champ in round 1, landing a thunderous combination that sent the legendary Louis reeling against the ropes. It would be a brief brush with greatness as Joe recovered and buried the challenger, recording his 23rd straight title defense with 21 ending by knockout.
The winner by a knockout and still the heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Louis.
Joe later explained that, quote, the Moriello fight was the last time I really felt like my old self. I had complete control, energy, and power. Coming up, ringside analysis as Louis squares off against Jersey Joe Walcott in a 15-round brawl, one that ended in a controversial split decision. And then the rematch. Yankee Stadium shakes with another grand finale.
There's Louis, the left side of the chin, and Louis is down from the right close to the chin. Walcott floored Louis, who got up without any count.
And then it's another historic matchup. Marciano versus Louis at Madison Square Garden. This is Ringside on ESPN Classic. Back here on Classic Ringside, Joe Louis, 1947. Joe Louis has won 14 straight fights by knockout, Bert, and he's basically looking to retire, have a retirement fight, right? How does it happen that Jersey Joe Walcott gets this shot?
I mean, Joe Louis knows that his career is coming to an end. And there's nobody to fight. Joe Baxi, #1 contender, has just decided he hears his relatives calling in Czechoslovakia and he's going over there for the holidays.
That's right.
Which just happened to be 3 months. So he's not taking the fight.
Didn't want his title shot with Joe.
Didn't want any shot at Joe.
Okay.
Leoma has lost. There's nobody around. All right, we'll give him a night in the garden in December, 47, Christmas gift, his farewell, an exhibition against this guy named Joe Walcott from Jersey or something. An exhibition, 6 rounds. Well, the New York State Athletic Commission says the New York State Athletic Commission says that the heavyweight champion cannot have an exhibition over 4 rounds. Therefore, it must be an official title fight. Oh, okay, it's an official title fight. We don't know much about Joe Walcott. He fights with the frequency of Halley's Comet. And if you look at his record, it's excellent for what it is, but he is also like Jimmy Braddock during the Depression and afterwards, fighting once a month, 2 months, 6 months, whenever he gets the call on a week's notice, and he's loading Campbell's soups off the dock in Camden to make a living. He's got no living in boxing. So that's the opponent, and he's not thought of as anything but an opponent.
Angelo, what do you know about Jersey Joe Walcott?
Who the heck wanted to fight Joe Walcott? Joe Walcott was so slick, so smart.
That's right.
He'd give you that shovel off the buffalo, boff, he hit you right. Guy would admire his footwork. He shuffle off the buffalo to the left, boom, you with your left hook. You could look good with Joe Walcott. Walcott was a great fighter.
Yeah. In fact, let me tell you something. The moves that Joe Walcott made, he taught Ali. That's what happened.
Did you?
Yeah. That's right.
What did you teach him? What moves did you incorporate from Joe Walcott?
Copycat.
But you know who had the connection?
What moves? What did you teach Ali?
Utilize them because you get stuff you can put on another fighter. So I was able to put it on Muhammad because he was a great fighter.
You know, Walcott always looked like a fistic sand dancer. He would move his feet and walk backwards 2 steps, spin off his right, and throw a right.
Throw right in.
Brian, he got the most out of the least.
Here we go, December 5th, 1947, Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And Jersey Joe Walcott here in the first round puts down Joe Louis. So there's the Christmas gift returned early in December, Bert. So Walcott puts Louis down.
Very quickly. And he's moving with a right hand. Everybody talks about his left hand. There he goes again with the right hand hurting him. And there he goes shuffling off. Oomph.
Stunning to see that, and I remember watching this and trying to roll it back and say, I got to see that again. How did that exchange occur? Because Louis was stunned in going backwards.
I mean, that's the first time in 8 years Louis has been knocked down. I mean, people since Tony Galento. People don't realize because he's now totally invincible that he can be put down.
Walcott couldn't get fights because he was such a difficult opponent. Who knew Walcott? The managers knew Walcott. I stayed away from the guy. Who the heck wanted to fight him anyhow?
There was 2 guys that took care of Walcott, and they did a hell of a job, understand? But they couldn't come outward like that. That was Felix Boquicchio and Dick Marcella. They had him. They moved him, understand? And when they saw the opportunity with the exhibition, like Bird said, understand, and they could turn it into a real fight, they made the moves.
And Joe Walcott had a great career before, he couldn't get fights, as Angie said, and the Depression set in. He was a sparring partner. He was, first of all, Jack Blackburn, before he got Joe Louis, was teaching him in the Philadelphia gyms. But when he got Joe Louis, he dropped Jersey Joe Walcott, who was a sparring partner against Louis, had knocked him down. And all of a sudden, as Lou said, he was just a forgotten person.
That's all he was.
So in the early going, again, Jersey Joe Walcott has Joe Louis in a heap of trouble. Got the knockdown with that right hand. When we come back, we'll have much more. It turned out to be a controversial fight, an excellent fight, though. Jersey Joe Walcott putting it to Joe Louis, the heavyweight champion. This is ESPN Classics Ringside. Joe Louis. We're back in a minute. Welcome back to Ringside. Now back to the 1947 heavyweight title fight between Joe Louis and former sparring partner Jersey Joe Walcott.
Walcott feints with the left hand, puts out a left lead, takes the left jab, a hard left jab on the nose by Louis. That one really hurt. You could hear it all over the place. Walcott feints the left hand. Here's Louis coming in on him. A solid right to the jaw by Walcott. He takes that past the left guard. Another right on the head by Walcott. And then he goes into a clinch. He's moving in on Louis now. And he takes the right on the jaw by Louis. And Louis is on the rope at the bell. Louis finds him with a left jab on the nose, finds him with another light left jab. Walcott moves back in time from the second one. Here's Walcott crouching a little bit. Louis sticking out a left hand that's short. Walcott feigning with the left hand. Louis all the way was from the aggressor. Make no mistake about that. But Walcott is putting up a fight. There's no question about that either. Now Walcott is nabbed with that left jab on the chin again. Louis is moving in on him. Walcott drops his gloves down to the side. Now he lifts his arms up again. He feints with the right hand. Moves in, moves back. And now Louis dives from the right to his jaw. Louis is down from another right. 4, 5, 6, Louis, 7. Louis is up at the count of 7. He was down against the right. Here's Walcott. Wow, with the right over the head. Walcott is trying to finish Louis now. He staggers him with another right on the chin. But it's Wow with the right, and Louis has to hold on. Louis held on. Louis is up with the left hook on the chin. Louis is holding on, and he's hurt, and he's in trouble. There are 2 minutes remaining in this round. 2 minutes. A right over the head by Walcott. Louis ducks under it in time.
All right, Bill, it's round 5. The bout is scheduled for 15 rounds. Lewis is now moving around Walcott. He's not moving in quite as fast as he did in the other round. Now Walcott is coming in on him a little bit. Perhaps he figures the champion is calling for time. No punches thrown so far in this round. Not even a lead put out. It is just short of the mark. He puts in the left hand to the body. He drops the left jab, but is rolled by Walcott. Walcott is really running in this round. Lewis is shot with a left jab off the barrel. Walcott was wild with the right hand that time. He finds Lewis with a solid right to the jaw, and then Lewis fires back with another right to the jaw. Again, they exchange right hands, and Walcott jabs a light left hand on the chin of the champion. Here's Lewis coming in again with a light left jab on the chin. Walcott backing toward a neutral corner, flicks out another left on Lewis's chin. Walcott feints the left and drives the right to the head, takes a left hook on the jaw by Lewis, a left jab and a solid right to the jaw by Lewis, and then Walcott is up with a left hook and a right cross to the chin, and this time Lewis fires back with another right, and Walcott is wild with a right over the head. Walcott takes a hard left hook under the heart.
More of the 1947 Joe Louis, Jersey Joe Walcott fight ahead on ESPN Classic. Plus, ringside analysis from Gleason's Gym with Angelo Dundee, Lou Duva, and boxing historian Bert Sugar. Welcome back to Ringside, Joe Louis. Before we return to the 1947 Louis Jersey Joe Walcott title fight, it's time for a quick ringside trivia timeout. The Brown Bomber and Jersey Joe would meet twice in the ring. But did you know that their paths would cross again at another World Heavyweight Championship fight? And this title bout ended in even a more controversial fashion than their own. On May 25th, 1965, Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston resumed hostilities in Lewiston, Maine. The referee for the Ali-Liston rematch was none other than Jersey Joe Walcott. Sitting at ringside was Joe Louis. Of the so-called phantom punch that famously knocked Liston out in the first round, Louis once said, "The punch was like throwing cornflakes at a battleship." Toe-to-toe in the ring, there's no phantom punches being thrown between these two, Louis and Walcott. Let's get back to the action of their first fight. The bell is calling the fighters for round 8.
Walcott jabs the left on the mouth again. Here's Lewis coming in on Walcott. Walcott feigning in the left hand. Lewis is being hit by those counter blows by Walcott. Lewis coming in on Walcott. A hard left jab by Jersey Joe that time. Another left jab by Walcott is short, and he finds Lewis with an overhand right, which is partially blocked, aimed at the chin. Walcott backing toward his own corner. Lewis coming in on him, his gloves up high. Lewis picks off an imaginary jab with his right glove. Walcott is backing away along the ropes. Lewis is trying to counter him. Lewis jabs the left that lands on the right shoulder of Jersey Joe. The champion is moving in, flicking out a left-handed short. Walcott takes a hard left jab on the nose. That's a piston-like left hand that Lewis is using now. Walcott breaks stride, moves away. He must be tired. Lewis is coming in a little bit faster now. He may figure he's got Walcott set up. He jabs out a left that's short. Walcott feints the left hand, drops his gloves down to his side, picks them up again, shoots out a left, moves away from a left jab by Lewis. It turned into a good round of fighting. There's Walcott with a right to the head, and Lewis is wild with a right. Walcott tags him with a left and a right to the jaw. Walcott is staggered by two left jabs, a right jab, a left and a right to the head by Lewis. 30 seconds to go on the line. Lewis has him on the ropes. He's pounding him, but Walcott is fighting back with a left hook on the mouth. Well, Walcott another left hook on the jaw. Walcott a left and a right to the head, and Lewis let his chance get away. Walcott would not go down. A right to the head by Walcott, another left and a right by Walcott, and by Lewis the same punches. Another right to the jaw by Walcott, and there's Lewis banging away with both hands to the head, and so is Walcott, and finally Lewis gives ground. Lewis gives ground. There's the bell. Both boys are courageous to the core. Lewis, in desperate defense of his title, which he could lose tonight, is trying to stalk Walcott to set him up again. But Walcott won't be set up. He's backing away. He flicks out a left. Walcott just walks away and then comes in with a solid left hook. He wound up with a left hook from left field and staggered Lewis for just a fraction of a second.
Stay tuned for the controversial 15-round split decision between Joe Louis and Jersey Joe Walcott. Bert Sugar and the gang standing by at Gleason's and will share opinions on the outcome. And later discuss Louis taking on Hall of Fame fighters Ezzard Charles and Rocky Marciano. This is Ringside, a Joe Louis marathon.